Good morning, Livingston, and welcome to our second program on systemic racism here on Livingston Education. This discussion will focus on solutions. I'm Mike Raymer, and with me are my co-hosts Earl Smith and Fal Pandya. And welcome to our 8 panelists, all Livingston residents. Returning from our first panel, Alan Golston, Anthony Keys, and Keith Hines. And joining us, Artie D'Souza, George Shen, Blair Volpe, Naomi Bekretzian, and special guest, Livingston Mayor Sean Klein. Thanks so much, everyone, for being with us here today. For all watching, please participate in the live stream, ask questions, and post your comments. And now, I hand it over to Earl, who will start the discussion. Earl?
Thanks, Mike. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to our panelists. Good morning to everyone watching on Facebook Live and whatever media outlet you're using this morning to participate with us. We're looking forward to a lively and hopefully educational and productive discussion. And we're just happy that you're joining with us today. We're going to be talking about systemic racism and what it is and solutions to this ongoing, long-suffering problem this country's had. My personal view of systemic racism is just basically, it stems from a long history of one way of thinking that white is right. That the white way of thinking, the white culture, the white belief, the white view of society is the one and only way, and everyone else is less than. And that affects our education system, our judicial system, our business, everything, every cycle of life that you can be involved in, it plays a part. And it's hindered our I guess, success as a country and as a world for that matter. And I just want to turn it over to the panelists and get their view of what they think systemic racism is and how we can start taking steps to, I guess, for lack of a better word, fix it and make it and end it once and for all. I don't expect to have solutions on this panel that's going to be in effect right away today. And I mean, this is a way of us talking about it, discussing it, educating each other on it, getting different views on it, and going forward. We can't expect to solve the problem all today because it's been a problem that's been going on for 400, 500 years. But it's a good way to start the conversation, and it's a good way to give other people a voice that feel they have something they can contribute. So I'm gonna, as my dual role as moderator and panel participant, I'm gonna first look to Anthony and ask him to chime in on how he feels about systemic racism, what he feels it is, and we'll start the conversation there. So Anthony, I turn it over to you.
Kind of caught me off guard, but that's okay.
Sorry.
So,
I know you come correct, so that's why I went to you.
So I think that one of the issues when you're talking about solutions for systemic racism is the fact that the word racist has such a charged meaning for people. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to have that conversation because of the stench of that word. And as Earl was discussing, you know, we kind of think in American history that white is the default, and therefore everything aspires to whiteness, and that everyone should aspire to whiteness. And so when you're looking at, you know, racism, it's because everyone has in their mindset what an American is. If you close your eyes and you say, what is an American? What would most people think an American is? And I think that people have different concepts of what an American is. You know, it's almost like asking somebody what their favorite food is. And if someone doesn't like what you like, some people are like, how could you not like this? And like, how could you not aspire to be this? But everyone doesn't aspire for the same things. And I think it's learning how that it's not okay, that it's okay not to like the same things, but also looking historically at who profits from people fighting, and understanding that there are mechanisms to keep the races disjointed. And these have actually been historically, you can look at these, document these. This has been happening for over 350 years in this country's history, that there's a profit by keeping people fighting. And the you-ism, you know, that we have entire industries to keep people at each other's throats. And that if we looked historically speaking, and I'm looking at the shirt that Blair is wearing right now, Fred Hampton was a person who was able to unify those poor people together, and that caused such disruption that he had to be taken out. And so whenever there's unity of the people who are pitted against each other, there are mechanisms to keep them, divided. So I think that the first thing we have to do is probably get away from the word racism and move towards something that's actually a little bit more fruitful, and that's caste. And if you look at it as a caste system as opposed to racism, you can now have a more productive conversation. And people don't have to feel like they're a bad person if they're participating in a system that we can show them. And it takes the insult away from the individual, and then they can begin to work towards a common solution.
Nice. I like that. I like that.
Great.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that in conversations of systemic racism, it's very important to remember that it's about the ways that racism operates on many different playing fields, like on an interpersonal level when it comes to individuals' bigotry and the way they communicate that and express that into the world. And then it escalates to institutional levels and structural levels, and all of that compounded together is how the system of racism operates. And when you're looking at it holistically, it's often helpful to get rid of the individual bigotry lens, right? Because systemic racism isn't about the bigotry of individuals, isn't about the hate that harbors in other people's hearts due to whatever our conservative cultural values as a country are. It's about the fact that if we somehow eradicated racism and every single person in this country was loving, rid of their implicit bias, and didn't see any people with prejudices somehow, we would still have systemically racist structures and institutions without reevaluating the history of those institutions and dismantling the aspects of them that disproportionately affect Black and Brown people. And so that's how the conversation of solutions to systemic racism isn't necessarily open-ended, because the solution to systemic racism is to dismantle those systems. And then the conversation kind of opens up as to how are we going to go about that, in what steps, in what order, what comes first, do we target education, public health, policing, etc.
I agree 100%. But another thing we can do is look at it as far as a macro level and a micro level.
Right.
And on a micro level, what are we willing to do ourselves? And I would like to mention my fraternity, Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated. We have a scholarship that we give to graduating African-American seniors. The most we've given is $5,000 scholarships. It's normally $1,000 per scholarship. The one thing that we did this year, Zeta Omega chapter, is I'm now the chairperson. So we want to open it up to more schools. Zeta Omega is down in Atlantic County. So I want to open it up to the Livingston community. If you know an African-American male senior that is graduating, please have them contact me. My email address is my name at verizon.net, ALANGHOLSTON at verizon.net. I would love to get them an application, and we would love to see more people from our community here getting these scholarships. And Naomi, she has reached out to help. And so I thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And we're definitely going to connect on that.
For sure, for sure.
I would just jump. Sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
Oh, no, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna, I just because it's very germane to what Alan just said. So obviously, listen, I'm here as a mayor and representative of sort of government and and its role in this problem. And I just want to say that there's a solution. It's a partial solution, but I wanted to just address it because the point that you just brought up, Alan. So one of the things that I've personally been working on is what's called FAFSA applications. I don't know if everyone's aware of it. What FAFSA stands for is a free application for student aid. And so Texas passed a law a couple of years ago, or maybe last year, with COVID, the time just sort of loses meaning. But where they said that any graduating senior would not get a diploma unless they had a FAFSA application stapled, a filled out FAFSA application stapled to the diploma. So what that means is that this is a way of ensuring there are a lot of people, especially in low income areas of our state, who would like to go to college or do go to college, but it is a financial burden for them. And maybe they don't finish college when they start it because life gets in the way and money is important to, you have to feed families and you have to take care of people. You have to pay the rent. And this is a way for New Jersey residents, if this gets passed at the state level, to get millions of dollars from the federal government to the neediest people in our state. And it's for the best cause. It is for people who can't afford college or have a hard time paying for college. And this is federal money that's going to be given as grants. This is not loans, these are grants. And, we always talk about how there are moocher states and donor states. We are a donor state as New Jersey, so we really should have all the mechanisms that we can have to get federal funds back to our state because we pay so much out. And this is a way of getting federal money to people who need it the most. It is a way of getting people with low incomes into college, paying for college, and trying to ensure their success. And so after hearing about Texas doing that, I did a little bit of research on that, and I forwarded information to Mila Jacey, who's our assemblywoman at the state level. And she's been working on this, and I'm hoping by next year that we're going to have this in place as a law. I know that it's moving forward in the assembly, and people are excited about it. And for me, it's been gratifying to make a difference in that way. But it really goes along. Alan, you guys are doing a great job with your grants. $1,000, $5,000, but if we have millions of dollars coming in, it just shows you that government, obviously, I don't have to say this, has a huge role to solve these problems, and we have to do it.
Yeah, and Sean, I think that's a great leeway into allyship. And I do want to bring up that it's not on our Black community members to be educating us on racism. And that's a huge thing. And Mike, I know you're starting these panels, so I just want to bring up, what else have you been doing for allyship within anti-racism?
Is that directed at me or
yeah, Mike?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to, again, I'm in a role as a moderator, but happy to speak with you about that, Blair. I mean, I think we want to use these platforms that were built on Facebook. Livingston Education has over 3,700 members. And we, as you all have known, this has been a very important topic, and we want to help and continue that conversation. This is our 4th or 5th program on Black Lives Matter. And as you all know, we're not going to solve this problem in a month, a year, a decade, but we're on the path. And if I can help.
That's very pessimistic. A decade's a long time frame.
John, a decade, right? If we could do it all in a decade, wouldn't that be fabulous, right?
Hopefully a decade could make a difference.
Wave a magic wand in a decade. But
I mean, to put in perspective, that's like centuries of oppression getting.
Yeah, to your point, Blair, and then let's use these platforms for the good. Raise awareness, continue the conversation as we are doing.
Right, but also within ourselves, it's on everyone who is not a Black community member and dealing with this oppression directly to educate themselves. And the fact that many of us here who are panelists and just narrating what's going on didn't even know what systematic racism was until a week ago is a little problematic in itself. And I think it's important to internalize how we're all part of the system. And I mean, I don't know what the game plan is here. And yes, conversation's great, but unless you're doing this work when the camera's off, it seems a bit white savior to me.
Well, again, thank you all for being here. We'll continue to raise awareness and educate the community and have this ongoing dialogue.
And ourselves as well.
That's a step, and we're doing it here. And thank you all for this. And hopefully there'll be more discussions, and we'll get to some solutions and how we can solve some of these issues. Anthony?
I was going to say, and this is not just to the people on the panel, but the listeners as well. Do non-people of color, or specifically non-African Americans, ever ponder how does racism and bigotry affect their lives? Because it does affect your life too. And like, what are some of the ways? I can think of some ways, but I want it to become internal. And if anybody on the panel could even think about it, how does keeping certain people down affect you? Because it does have a deleterious impact on you as well.
Well, I'd like to say a few words here. First of all, thank you to Mike. And I think we are very fortunate to be part of this community where we have this platform to, air our grievances and try to make a difference. I've spoken to people from other towns and they don't have such things. So thank you. And I think this is not only confined to African Americans. Yes, they have been facing this for years. And me, who has come as an immigrant in my early 20s, I thank America, for everything. And yes, I have had experiences um, that have been racist at my workplace, at school, and I think it's important for all of us, white, black, brown, pink, to first of all acknowledge that maybe even subconsciously we are racist. Acknowledging that is important, and then having this mindset of wanting to change, wanting to be inclusive, have a sense of belonging, and let others be welcomed as well. And to me, racism is very closely tied to systemic racism, right? It is part of it. It kind of goes hand in hand. Um, and I know we're talking here about solutions. So for me, one thing would be to maybe start programs in school. Have kids learn about other cultures. Um, have some meetings and cultural activities for kids to mingle from other cultures. Break the ice, and as adults, it may be difficult for us to kind of change, but if our kids take it back home, it could make a difference. And I think it's worth a try to do some things like that at school levels and at a community level at large.
Right. Mr. Souza, I'd love to just jump on that point. As a student at the high school, I know there's a lot of cultural clubs from all different countries and backgrounds.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about how the extracurriculars operate in middle school, or what initiatives they might be having going on in elementary schools besides like the annual multicultural night. But I do think that your suggested initiative does bring forth a really great way to address the micro levels of racism that lead to the macro levels of racism. So at its core, implicit bias and prejudice, it's driven by the fact that we don't see people that we classify as others as the same level as human dignity. And that can only be accredited to the fact that when you don't grow up seeing people around you in the same capacity that you see your family and you see yourself represented, you do start to you don't see their human dignity, and you don't also see their worth. And I'm saying they because after growing up in Livingston, and I also did not see a lot of people that looked like me, I'm not necessarily putting myself on the same level as the white oppressor, but I am kind of just understanding what it looks like to grow up and to not see people that don't look like you in your community, and see like how that anti-Blackness does manifest at a very, very root, right? So that's
what I mean.
So,
and then it connects.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, so that's what I mean by saying a sense of belonging. We all need to feel, a fair playing ground, basically, right? Right. And open dialogues, with kids and teachers, and would really make a difference. I feel, like small baby steps, right?
Yeah. And so that demonstrates interpersonally.
And I'll say what my school is doing. I'm an elementary school teacher in Montclair. I work at Bradford Elementary School. And we had these issues that we're talking about, that Naomi is talking about, that Mr. Souza is talking about. And we actually started a committee made up of teachers and parents. So when we talk about like, what can you do? So the principal of my school gathered together teachers, gathered together members of the community and said, how does our curriculum look like our community? Where doesn't it look like? So we took something very simple and very basic. Our after-school enrichment programs. Our after-school enrichment programs did not service the African-American kids. It had nothing to do with African-American culture. So why would an African-American family want to participate in an after-school enrichment program that doesn't look like them? And that was something that easy fix when you think about it, but for years and years and years, the people who are on the committee, because it becomes like the same parents are the ones, and then the other parents feel like they're cut out, you know, and how do you get all family members feeling like they can be a part of the PTA, having a voice in making decisions? So something very simple like that, and we were able to then, you know, put books that made sure that things look like, because, you know, as a teacher, you're thinking to yourself, you know, I'm doing all these wonderful things. I went to a workshop, as opposed to talking to the actual end users who are the parents, who are the families, you know, and that's something that when we talk about what can be done, those are things that can be done, and really giving people who haven't had a voice. And what Naomi said, there is a specific anti-Blackness that goes on into American society, whether it's conscious or subconscious, you know.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
And one thing I want to say, I'm sorry, Naomi, you were talking?
Right, sorry. So to go back to what I was saying before with that micro level of racism being the individual's prejudice, implicit biases, I think that the number one way to target that is by desegregating our neighborhoods, because the root of all of that, again, is when you don't see people that don't look like you growing up in the communities around you. And most definitely one of the most vile aspects of systemic racism is segregated neighborhoods. Specifically, you could just see it within Essex County. If you even look within one town, within West Orange, you can just see the prices of their neighborhoods and their communities and the segregation that is within that just of itself. North Jersey, I think New Jersey is actually one of the most segregated states in the nation, with Wisconsin being number one. And so,
you know about redlining?
Yes, exactly. It's a history of redlining, of Jim Crow, and how it, without any type of reevaluating those systems, that's how we're left today with the prevailing system of racism in real estate and essentially segregated neighborhoods. And so the number one way to challenge that would be by introducing affordable housing units to what we now consider the more affluent communities, or the more, I'm going to say safer, quote unquote, because that's the problematic way to refer to it. And so once you desegregate those neighborhoods, you're introducing more diversity into those communities, and it's inevitable that the children that then grow up in those communities are going to be exposed to more aspects of different cultures, and that, like, at its very root, it'll leave them less susceptible to prejudice and bias.
I agree 100%, Naomi. And to your point, Stanford University did a study on this last June. It's called The Psychology of American Racism. And in that study, it states that people can create biases from lack of interracial contact. And they also state that there are social hierarchies, but moreover, they say that, and this is a direct quote, children are efficient at encoding social hierarchies, especially children in high statuses. So we may not even think we have a problem, but even when you look at the elementary level, the high school level, we have a problem because these kids are taking that social construct and they're manifesting it when they're at their schools. And so we have to make a change. But however, the first part of it, and Earl always says this, the change starts at home, because if we don't think we have a problem, then we're never willing to change the problem.
Well, the other part of this also, and this is, obviously completely interwoven to whatever all the things is empathy is the underlying issue here, right? You have to be able to feel what other people are feeling, and if that is in essence recognizing humanity in other people that are walking around. And if you don't have empathy for people, then this problem doesn't go away. And so I think there's a couple of different ways to create empathy, and one of them is to make sure you are exposed to people who are different from you, so that you have a sense of their humanity and you can feel what they're feeling and hear their stories, and understand what their families are like. I mean, I'm a physician, so I come from this from a biological point of view. We are all the same. Okay, there's different histories that have sort of, pushed us into different socioeconomic levels and so forth. And the point is this, is that you can have empathy by meeting people, and we need to do that. The other way of creating empathy is storytelling. And it's really important. And I think that our storytellers in society are doing a much better job of this, of putting Black faces into Black roles where a white audience can really feel for that person and relate to that person. I brought this up before when we unveiled the Black History Month banner about Watchmen. How amazing it was to watch Regina King in that role. I mean, those kinds of roles. I don't care who's watching it. I mean, you are in it with her, and she's a strong presence, and you're rooting for her, and that creates empathy. That makes you understand that other people, they may look a little different from you, but they are the same as you, and they are people that you can root for. And once you create that sensation in people, that's how you climb over these hurdles. And that's what you need to do. And by also storytelling helps to eliminate this sort of hierarchy, right? Because we can use our stories to make the protagonists whoever we want them to be, and whoever we want to, whoever we are trying to lift up and listen to. And so I think storytelling is really important, and I think it's something we have to keep doing. And I think we're getting better at it. That's something that makes me optimistic, is that when we see these stories, for example, I'm again, Blair, you're chiming in for a second, but right, this movie just came out. I've watched the first half of it. I did not watch the second half of it, about Judas and the Black Messiah, okay, which is the story of Fred Hampton. And, this is considered, I read an article, this is one of the most radical movies that's ever come out of mainstream Hollywood. But look what it does. It makes you understand people and relate to people. And when this is the storytelling that's going on, this is how the world changes, is through storytelling. So that's one thing that I look at, and it makes me optimistic. And that's why I think a 10-year horizon, maybe, we may be able to see much better progress over a shorter horizon in 10 years. And that's something I think about a lot.
I agree with Sean.
I think storytelling is really important, but it's more in regards to education. But it's also extremely important that we're not putting it on our Black community members to share their stories and to help us have empathy in order to understand racism. Like, there's already a lot out there that we can utilize, and especially if we're paying for the labor of hearing these stories from our Black community members. But for example, in this panel, we're not. So I think it's an important thing to just come back to. And in regards to staying neutral, Mike, I know you said that you're a panelist here and a moderator and staying neutral, but we live in a country that is racist. It is founded off of racism. So there's no such thing as being neutral when it comes to this discussion. And unless we're being actively anti-racist, nothing is going to change.
Well,
I would like to, on Sean's point, thank you so much about discussing empathy. I think that is, if we look at some of the roots to this and take it one step beyond, I think you were getting to that, Sean, cultural empathy, right? Anthony, you brought that up in the last panel. And that ties into really what Earl discusses at the heart. And I'm in agreement with you, Earl, that it does start in the home. But how can we move that into the schools?
Well, I actually have something that, and I think that Mayor Sean kind of spoke about this, but if we think about two of the most despicable nations in the past 150 years, and we look at Germany and we look at South Africa, okay? After they went through their despicable acts, they had to admit that they went through their despicable acts. And the government did panel, and they studied those despicable acts. So it wasn't a piecemeal trying to fix what the German people did to the Jewish people. It wasn't a piecemeal, small towns discussing how do we reincorporate Africans. But it was a systemic thing. So you're not getting, like what Alan discussed, one university, but you had the power of the government able to work with all branches to make this go all the way through. And there's currently a bill that is not getting onto the floor. So when you say the word reparations, people think, oh, money. but there's so much more to reparations. It's also the study of the root causes, and actually you probably could fix it in 10 years if you put the full weight of the government behind it. But you can't even get the bill to the floor. So I think one thing that everybody can do is write to their state representative to at least get the bill on the floor, so that even if it becomes not money in people's pockets, but money towards fixing systems, we can at least define the problem that everybody has the same working definition.
And to piggyback off of Anthony, so HR 40, that first was introduced by John Conyers in 1989. Every year, there's always been someone, that's 32 years. Every year, someone's picked up that bill and tried to get it put into a law. For 32 years, we have not passed that bill in the House and Senate. 32 years. Now, let's go back to history, more history that Anthony was talking about with Germany and World War II. World War II ended in 1945. Germany had what they called the Claims Conference. It was called the Delegation of Claims Conference. That was started in 1952. In 1952, Germany agreed to pay $845 million to Israel for reparations. In 1988, they agreed to pay another $125 million, but that was awarded to the Holocaust survivors in terms of monthly payments for the rest of their lives. And then industry started to get sued, because there were industries that actually helped the German government, like Mercedes-Benz actually building engines for their planes. And so in 1999, industry in Germany, alongside the government, actually agreed to pay another $5 billion. And that was to be awarded to people who were enslaved and had to work for free during that time, in checks of $2,500 to $7,500. So everyone is always talking about how America is the greatest country, but we can't even get HR 40 passed in 32 years. However, look what Germany did in 7 years. They started reckoning with what they did in 7 years in 3 different payments. And we can't even get HR 20 to pass. And HR 20 is not reparations, it's to study reparations and to study the systematic effect of Jim Crow, slavery, and redlining and everything. So we as Americans have to agree first that we have a problem.
And if you look at some of the studies right now, people are saying that 1 year of being in remote learning is having a tremendous mental health impact on students. 400 years of slavery, then Jim Crow, and now what we have with our overcrowding of prisons because of the unfair, overly policing of Black neighborhoods. So what kind of mental health impact does that have? So
I think it's worse than, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think it's worse than a mental impact. I always think it's, when I think about the over policing and jailing, and the prison industrial complex. So I always think to myself, how are families who are subjected to that supposed to compete with families that have not been subjected to that? And it comes down to pure economics on one way of thinking about it, right? If you have a two-parent household putting all of their effort into raising, one or your 2 kids, think about losing half of that ability, right? Losing half of the potential income, half of the time to read to your kids at night, half of the time to advocate for your family. that is, you are people in a position where they cannot compete, right? When you come, especially to a place like Livingston, where there's a high performing school system, you have parents who are coming here and they are go, go, go. They are pouring their effort into their kids, pouring their effort into the next generation. They want to give them every advantage they can think of, and they're going to work as hard as they can to do that. Can you imagine having one hand tied behind your back and having to compete with that?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Yes, fair
Yeah,
enough.
yeah.
This is the problem, right? So this is the incredible disadvantage, and it's amazing. The bail reform. I think we can be proud that we had a governor in New Jersey who really actually was ahead of it, and Republican governor Christie, who was one of the first people in the country who stepped and said, we can't keep breaking up Black families. This is not okay. We need to, this is not servicing anyone. No one's benefiting from this. And he helped to change the law, and the new marijuana law, when that finally comes out. Right now there's some discussion and disagreement, and I think it's a reasonable disagreement when younger people are caught with marijuana, younger than are allowed to have according to the new law. Can there be any discipline? I mean, the point is we don't want kids younger than who's supposed to have it. Are they, what are we doing? People are caught, and so you don't want to penalize people and create permanent records for them. So there has to be some protection. But they're also, you want to dissuade people from smoking marijuana when they're 15. And so but the marijuana bill is going to be another huge step in the right direction. And so we have to take steps to heal families that have been subjected to these issues. It's really important. It's a major thrust that government has to stay on top of.
Mayor, can you talk about voting?
An example of the way that the prison industrial complex actually just grows to feed the prison industrial complex and its cyclical nature in that. Because the profits that the bill states that the profits from marijuana selling, all of that simply goes back to fund police departments and is not invested in the communities that the criminalization of marijuana has actually harmed for so long. And because of the criminalization of marijuana, we have overplaced neighborhoods, we have disproportionate numbers of Black and brown peoples in jail. And then, so now it's decriminalized, but then the profits from that simply go back to further police and jail those communities.
And even though Livingston may not be impacted as much by the criminality, it still becomes the whole mental thought that Black people are criminals. So therefore, when you see an African American in town that you don't know, you have a bias towards that individual, and you have no idea that that person is your neighbor. Because of the mental images. And that you were talking about, Mayor Sean, with storytelling, the number of directors who were not allowed to put their stories out and who had to modify them to make them more friendly to the mainstream. And to the fact that when I took my son to Black Panther, how many fathers cried that a Marvel movie showed individuals in a positive light. And I always tell people, think about how many times in a non-Black director movie have you seen an African American kiss somebody? You have to think long and hard for the thought of an African American showing love. That's not shown on TV very often. That's not shown in movies very often. The fact that we love, and the fact that in 2016, and you said you're a doctor, doctors felt that African American skin could take more pain. Therefore, we don't get the same medical treatment, and that people are lying right now in New Jersey about their race so they can get the coronavirus over underserved communities. These are the things that are still going on, and the fact that color blindness actually creates more problems than it solves. But I love what you're saying. Could you talk to everyone about what's going on in Florida, Georgia, and I think Alabama as well, as far as voting? Yes.
Well, I want to I'll say one quick thing about Black Panther. It's amazing, and also I think sort of, I don't want to use the word unfortunate or sad, but there's almost like a tinge of it, how important Black Panther was as a movie to so many people. It shouldn't have come to that, right? I mean, that's the problem, but you saw how important it was, what an amazing cultural earthquake that movie was. It was so needed, right? And that was the point. It was so needed. And I think that, and that goes to the storytelling that we were talking about before. I mean, we had previously discussed in the run up to this conversation about how in every state that was a swing state in this last presidential election, there are now enormous efforts to try to restrain voting and try to make it harder, especially for, as you said, in Georgia and in Florida. And we see these efforts in every single state where, Wisconsin as well, Arizona, and we're going to have to fight against it. And the problem is that, I'm a Democrat, so I'm going to say this. There were Democrats did not do very well down ballot besides winning the presidency. And as a result of that, there are going to be huge opportunities for gerrymandering in places that would like to exclude minority vote. And it's going to be a huge problem going forward over the next few cycles, because people who are trying to fix these problems are going to have a hard time getting to the polls. They're going to be restricted, and it makes it harder to deal with this stuff.
I want to go back to something that Alan was talking about before, where he's saying about America as a whole. He's talking about the proposed bill that's sitting in the House right now. Unfortunately for America's, I'm going to say this, and it's going to be very provocative, and so be it. This is just me. America is a great country. We've done a lot of great things. We have a lot to be proud of. But Dr. King even said it when he was alive: America's arrogance is going to be its downfall. Alan and Anthony were talking about Germany and South Africa. You could even throw Italy in there, as far as countries who came to grips with how they treated its own citizens and how they wanted to make not even make amends, but just be better. And America still hasn't come to that point yet. At least from my vantage point, in my 51 years on this planet. If you guys remember, back when Clinton went to go visit Africa, the big controversy was he can't apologize for slavery. Don't do it. Say it was a very unfortunate event. They were afraid if he apologized on the record that he will be making America as a country liable, and therefore reparations will be in effect. That was the mid 90s. And here we are, 20 something years later, we're still having that same discussion about the effect that racism and the treatment of Black people in this country over the centuries. It boggles my mind how we've come a long way, and we still have such a very far long way to go. And we won't ever get to that point until this country can come to grips. Like we were talking on offline the other day about how Black people have a unique experience in this country because how we came to be in the United States. Everybody has a story. Our story is definitely different from everyone else's. And because of that, I don't know if it's shame, I don't know if it's fear of payback, or whatever the case may be, this country has refused to come to grips with how it's treated its citizens of color. Well, and we go, and I don't think I can say, I'll say this for me, and you could feel free to disagree. I don't think there's not one group of people that's lived in this country that's given more blood, sweat, and tears to the investment and to the greatness of this country than Black people. Still in all, people still have a problem with us today. And as a people, we keep coming, we keep giving. We keep giving. Civil War, Spanish American War, Vietnam, Korea, World War I, World War II, Persian Gulf, the Afghan War. We are right in the forefront every time, right? Revolutionary War, for goodness sake. We are right there every time, but still this country has a problem with people with people of color. And until we come to grips with that as a country, I always say it starts in the home, and I'm a true proponent of that, and I preach that to my children and to people I care about every day. But until we come to grips with that, I don't know. I just don't know.
Well, yeah, and I think the system's working exactly how it was designed to work.
Yes, you said it, Blair. It definitely is. You said
right.
it.
And with that being said, I mean, in order to dismantle white supremacy, it's white people are going to lose power. And for example, I think this panel, no one here is benefiting off of this except maybe Sean and Mike within their own political advantages. And Mike, I know you were running for Board of Education, and Sean, of course, as a mayor, it's important to be here. But at the end of the day, unless you're stepping down and giving up your power and also allowing Black people to actually have the power to make the change, nothing's going to happen and nothing's going to change. And it's a scary thing because we're going to lose a lot of things we benefit off of as white people in white supremacy.
My one thing is, I'll take issue with the one word you used. Maybe you didn't. Maybe I'm gonna assume. I'm gonna take a leap of faith that I'll say this: as a Black man, and like I said, at my seasoned age, no one's allowing me to do anything. I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want.
Right.
And for my own personal reasons, I'm not more actively involved in city politics. That's something I've been debating and wrestling with, but in the 22 years I've been living in this town. I have no problem with people who want to come, who want to assist and want to and participate and help. But my point is this: my tradition's in the Black church, the Baptist church, and the first things first, you need to repent, and repent means you got to change your way of thinking, your way of believing, and you got to turn a different way. To truly repent is turn differently from how you thought before. When you have people in this country who still fly the Confederate flag, when you have people push back against having military bases named after Confederate generals, when you have people upset about taking down Confederate statues, for people who turned against this country, fought against this country, until you get that right, until you change that mindset, we got a long way to go. So, and repentance is the key. You could say, my dad's always say, you could say, oh, you're sorry you won't, but sorry don't fix the broken lamp. You got to change your way of thinking. And I think that's what, that's what, Larry, what you're saying is, until you start, and you got to not so much give up power, but make room for people other than you who look like you to be able to aspire to that power. And that's on, that needs its place as well.
I read something on the internet. I'm not sure where I read it. It was just a short little story. Basically, it was just a person explaining their interpretations and interactions with racism and systems of white supremacy. And their mindset is as follows. So if the white man wants to call me the N-word, hardy, R slur, that's his problem. That's not on me. If a person wants to fly a Confederate flag, that's on them. That's not on me. What's on me and what's the issue at hand is whether they have the power to do so with no repercussions. And that's definitely the mindset that we should be approaching systemic racism with. Because ultimately it does not come down to individual convictions. It doesn't come down to individuals' empathy. While those are starting points to challenge your own individual, to do the internal work within yourself, that's not going to fix systems of power, and that's not going to rid the world of systemic racism. What rids the world of systemic racism is actually reckoning with those systems, redistributing power, redistributing wealth, and acknowledging the fact that we live in a white supremacist society. Like recognizing economic disparities, recognizing racism in medicine and real estate, segregation, all of that. And that comes with policy work and community organizing. Individual empathy does not challenge that.
Let me just
but hold on now, hold on. One second, Anthony, one second. That's true. And I agree with you on that. But who's going to do the work? If you don't have the mindset to do the work, how are you going to change it? So I agree. There's systems in place that need to be broken down to its core and redone.
Yes, yeah.
I get that, but who's going to do the rebuilding? If you don't have the right mindset to rebuild, you're going to be putting up a statue in the same place that was before.
Yeah.
Yes, the rules have to change, but the rule makers have to change too.
But Earl,
the rule makers have to be upholding the rules before they are changed.
Let me say this real quick, because I think what happens is that what Blair was saying is that white people fear they have to give up power. And I don't think you do. I think what you have to realize is that you're shown one small pie. If you work together, you can bake more pies. You know what I'm saying? And everybody's trying to get that same piece, and like, let's get the ingredients work together and make more pies. So you get someone saying, well, you're gonna lose 10,000 jobs. Guess what? If you use your resources for understanding and stop using them against each other, you can build 100,000 jobs. But everyone dangles this little piece in front of you, and now it's me versus them. We can't let the immigrants take our jobs, or we can't let those Black people come and take our jobs. And oh, there's a black person moved on my street. Oh, it's going to go down because of the politics of otherism. Because of the politics of otherism, we fight rather than build together. You know what I'm saying? And I love Isabel Wilkerson because one of the things she says, her father was a mechanical engineer. He was a literal bridge builder. And if we can build bridges between the people who have been told to fight each other, we can keep our power and make more. The number of people who made money during this pandemic while everybody else suffered. There was a political gain, a financial gain for a lot of people to keep this pandemic running longer. And we don't see that because we're so busy pointing at each other and like, oh, you don't wear a mask and it's a hoax. They're telling you it's a hoax while they're getting vaccinated. We don't see these things and we end up fighting rather than saying, hold up, how am I getting better? I'm not living as much as I would like to. You're not living as much as you'd like to. Let's build a business together. Let's become job creators rather than seeking someone else's piddly little job. And the power that we have within ourselves rather than pointing and blaming, oh my goodness, what we could do if we just looked rather than being told what to look for. Our TV, our news stations tell us who to fear. We don't even question why. We're just told to fear this. We're told to think this way. We need to read for ourselves, think for ourselves, do for ourselves, build for ourselves, and stop making the person who should be your brother your enemy.
And you know what? I agree 100%. But what I would like to hear is from, and George, I know you mentioned that you were an immigrant. This is your first generation American. So let's get some of your thoughts on systematic racism from an outside perspective, someone who came to this country and who was not born here and who did not grow up in this society. What's your opinion of it?
Yeah, sorry, at the beginning I have some technical glitch, so I might miss the introduction. Yeah, I really learned a lot from the conversation today. One of the purpose I want to bring, the point I want to bring up here today is, not only the African American is facing the systematic discrimination, and everybody, United States is a very unique country. We have a relatively short history compared to China or Europe. So we come together with one goal. We try to make the new continent prosperous, and we got the advantage because the physical situation here. But there are a lot of problems for the community, for the society. One of the example I want to bring up is it's called the Chinese Exclusion Act. I'm surprised that when I mentioned this one to several panelists, and not much people has some details on it. So the Chinese Exclusion Act is passed in 1882, prohibiting the immigrant of Chinese laborers. This is ban the Chinese people from immigration to United States. This is the first and only implemented law to prevent all members of a specific ethnic and national group from immigration to the United States. I think the impact is not just only this act, but also it built up the roots that, there are some of the slang, some of the word coming from that years that hurt the Chinese people who ever live in this country. And even nowadays, it's not a big deal, but during the pandemic, we can see those roots just coming out. I got a phone call from many concerned parents when the kids go to school, they wear a mask. They say, okay, there's something wrong with Chinese kids. So I got more than I can bear. So I need to bring this up to the Board of Education that the school system has to address that. So, everybody suffers when the discrimination exists. That's a deep root. So we have to, I totally agree that we have to admit that some of the act, even the law level, they are wrong in the history. And we have to admit that. We have to make sure that the education is in the right way, deliver the right information, that everybody is equal. Everybody contribute to this country in their certain way. So we have to have a community in a right structure to put everybody, they can fully utilize their impassion, their talents to contribute this country. I like the comment by Anthony a lot. It's that we are looking for collaboration. We are not white against the black, or that won't lead United States to any.
Right. Well, yeah,
Right, that's a great point, George. We talked about that a little bit after a little bit yesterday after you got offline, how about that act, and I mean, and how it's interesting to note that there wouldn't be a Western Railroad if it wasn't for the Chinese people that came over and helped build that railroad, and most of them did it for low wages, if not for no wage at all. So, and then to turn around and say, okay, you guys cannot be full-fledged citizens, to make a law about that it's very disheartening. So you're right on point on that.
Can I say something?
To pick up on,
Yes.
You know, this panel was great. We talked about this things with this, that, and this, and different changes. I believe that we should changes right here in home and town. You know, we got a vast world. We start with our town, a little point. We start here. Yeah, right. Georgia, Atlanta, all that, right. But we start here in that community here. We start building steps. And then, you know, we work our way. Yes, we got prejudice and stuff going on, but I believe that we can address it together. This panel is like a blueprint. It's a blueprint for a plan, like building a house. We may not get all it done, but at least it's a start. It's a start with what we're doing today. And then later down, we will take action. We will do is execution. We will execute. But I believe today is very important now that we are setting the blueprint. We're talking about different things back and forth. People saying we work together, we start a blueprint and we build on that blueprint. When the blueprint is all done, then we start building the bricks. Like Earl says, it begins at home. That's when the bricks are made. The bricks are being built up. You know, building a house, you have to be a rocket scientist to do that. So once we start doing that, building bricks, understanding people, talking to people, meet people halfway, then you can see, you know, it's easy for us to say, well, oh yeah, that's happened this, that happened there. My followers told me, you got steps, always keep going up the steps, and then come back down. And like, I learned something from yesterday when we did the thing at the diner, the young man that owns that diner, and he was in corporate world and he hit snags, but he kept going. Yes, we're gonna hit snags, there's gonna be problems. We're gonna hit a whole bunch of snags, but we can rise again. And the one thing I did like what Mr. Earl said too, repent. I'm putting my deacon hat on now. Repent, that's very important to repent. So once you repent, the whole thing changes. So we need to learn to build, like I said, sound like a broken record, is build our blueprint. No house is built without no blueprint. Once we have the blueprint made, then we start laying the bricks and then you start building the house. That's what I feel. I feel that we can do it in our own community. We work in our own community and people see happening in Livingston, and then people come over and say, oh, but Livingston's doing that. How you do that? That's how we do it. Name calling and calling up certain names. Yes, we have problems. I had problems too, but I learned to build my bricks, and I learned to respect people's views, and I learned to talk to people halfway. They may call me the N-word. They call me the N-word, like Anisha said. That's on him. That's on him to call me N-word. But if for me, I'll continue to build my bricks, and I'm proud to be in this town. I gotta admit, this town has treated me good. I gotta admit that.
I gotta stop you there because we can't be calling people the N-word. That's gotta stop. That's
Right.
not okay.
Yeah,
You know what,
I was
though?
kind of with you till that.
No,
Yeah, but you know what, though? You know what, though?
Nope.
You gotta treat people with respect.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. But
Now, I don't
people-
care.
Yeah.
You don't disrespect anybody, call anybody out of their name.
Mm-mm.
And you have to know the history, like George was talking about, and how despicable that was, and make sure that I teach those things. I teach fifth grade. I teach them everything. Everybody's like, oh, they're too young. No, they're not too young. They're not too young. They need to know. They need to respect people. They need to know people's pains. You know what I'm saying? And we also need to know people's joy as well. You know, so we have to come to a certain understanding of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable behavior for any society. So no, even what Naomi was saying, it's like, it is not on you to do the Confederate flag. That is a flag of a traitorous nation. We got to do a better job of saying what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in our society.
And
That is
again,
not heritage. That was meant to scare Black people. It was an act of terror when they rebrought it back in the 1920s.
20s. Yep.
After the African Americans came back from World War I. You got to know your history. And that way people can't give you ignorant things. That's why you got to study. When were those monuments put up? They weren't put up after the Civil War. They were put up in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. So understanding where these things come from is going to free you in so many ways, and you can have a cogent conversation. Because someone goes, it's always been there. No, it hasn't. It was put up there for a specific reason. And as a society, none of us can accept it. And I just can't do the African American things. Right now, there is a lot of hatred going towards Asian Americans.
Yep.
And people calling it the China virus, and people knocking out old Asian people. It's unacceptable. And I got to stand up for everybody. It's an injustice for all of us when it's done to somebody.
Right. I mean, I for one, fear for my kids. You know, I have a, you know, my kindergartner comes back home and tells me about names he's being called in school, and that's not acceptable. So like to pick on Anthony's point about the pie, you know, like at a workplace, if you have a white and a Black person, we are asking for a Black to be promoted. You know, all we're asking for is a fair playing ground. You know, look at all the other aspects, the qualifications, you know, his experience, and equal opportunity here. You know, and I also liked, you know, I'm focusing on solutions here. So I loved Mr. Sean's point about airing movies. Maybe, you know, that could influence our kids.
Yeah.
Like my kids were told to read the book Wonder in their elementary school, and I think that makes it a good impact. You know, Earl says it starts at home, and I am a big advocate of that. It does start at home. Teach your kids empathy, kindness, no name calling, respect each other, and I think if we do take these little baby steps, the next generation will look at all this differently. You know, make a difference in society.
Let me be fair. We have made a lot of we've made a lot of progress.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
it's just like with my child. I just want to see you do better. And it's like what Earl was saying before. African Americans love this country. We love it so much. We get, you know, not what we deserve. We still keep coming back. And I think there is a fear. And I hate to quote Louis Farrakhan, but I'm going to have to. You know, when he said that when you all think that we're going to do to you what you did to us, that's not who we are. We haven't done it yet.
We don't have it.
Why would we start doing it now? So don't have this fear.
Anthony, he would do it to the Jews.
What's that?
Farrakhan would do it to the Jews.
I said, well, I hated what he was
back on
coming
that. So
from with it.
yeah, why don't you? LeBron James had a very good quote recently about how much Black people love the country. I'd rather hear you quote him than Farrakhan.
Well, you quote. You tell me about it.
Tell you about what?
Give me the quote, man. You're
Well,
part of
LeBron
this
James.
too.
I don't have the exact quote off the top of my head, but LeBron James essentially said that our people love this country so much, and we never stop loving the country. You know, essentially, no matter what the hardships have been, and you know, demanding to be respected, and rightfully so. But I don't, you know, if you're saying that Farrakhan wouldn't do to us what they would
I'm
do.
saying no. When I'm saying the words, I didn't say Farrakhan. I said the words.
No, I'm just saying. But if he says those words, I don't believe him when he says those
But
words.
Anthony Keys is saying those words, and you can believe Anthony Keys.
I like Anthony Kiedis, from what I know.
Thank you.
So I will take it as
So what
that.
I'm saying is that I have no, I want to see everybody do better. You know what I'm saying? But you know what that means? That means people got to work. It takes work. People got to study. People got to listen, you know? And we and none of us, you know what I'm saying? So if we start throwing out if we start throwing out the baby with the bathwater, we got to throw out Gandhi. So from your same logic, Gandhi was very anti-African American or very anti-African.
Yes,
If we start throwing out people because of the horrible things they did, we're going to throw out a lot of people in history who we consider, you know,
As we should.
models.
As we should, yeah.
Guys, this is a tremendous panel. Your views at a society level is amazing. If we could, Mr. Hines, you have, your words are always respect you. You've been in town for 40 years. Like E.F. Hutton, you talk, people listen, in my view. Could you talk to us more about your experiences over the scope of your time in Livingston and the progress that you've seen at the community level and the direction of where we need to go from here, and perhaps some solutions from where we've come, from where we are, and where we need to go?
Well,
Mike, why is it being brought on Keith to share his experiences?
Curious of his experiences living in town for 40 years.
Yeah. I'm going to.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I have, like I said, I have some experience in town that was not too pleasant, which I did. I told you before, I went to a friend's house over in whatever street is, I'm not gonna name it, but the cops came. And this is going way back, this is going back, you know, I would say in the like 80s. And the cop came, said that, one cop said to me, "Oh, what you around here for? What you around here? You going? Oh, you know, what are you doing here? I said, I'm here to visit my friend." He goes, "Well, you know, you're odd in this neighborhood that you shouldn't be there." But see, the problem was, I was a little upset, but then I rised above it, and then I had other things too, like maybe at 7-Eleven, had a problem at 7-Eleven. But as I grew in this town, I realized I rise above it, in which I did. I worked at the gas station for 35 years. I used to walk from Union to Livingston. I had no money, enough money to buy a car. I used to walk it, 3.5 hour walk from Milburn to Livingston, Union to Livingston. So I had different things as things grew up, as go by. I worked at the town. We used to work for the town. We had a problem there. As I started working throughout the town, like I said, I'm blessed. I have to say the town have treated me good. I'll be lying right in. They have treated me good, and like I said, I had no money. I'll tell you something. I had no money. I was poor. I was skinny too. Now I was skinny. And what happened, I'll tell you this real quick story, because time is important. And then I worked way up into what the town should be doing. But number one, I used to work at the roller rink, Nero's, and Carnivals. And what I used to do was, I had no money. They used to give me a couple money to go to Jack in the Box. You guys who've been in town long know it was a Jack in the Box by 7-Eleven. Y'all know that. Then I used to go to Nero's at 11 o'clock. They used to feed me lunch, feed me dinner. I used to sit down with the employees, no charge. They used to feed me dinner when I was growing up. And I seen, stuff going on in town. I seen it. But I think today that we should, respect everybody, each other, and brown and black people should be heard in the town, which we can be heard, and it can start from us. They should be heard, because I understand their voices are not being heard. But I think that we should make their voices being heard. We should make programs attractive to them, make them attracted to come to us, reach out more into social media, television, the town paper, and reach out more to bring them to us. And once they see that, they will come to us. Right now, they're not coming because they, some up in the neighborhood. I see that we do step, come back, have them come to us, come out, and they will come out there. See our improvements. Like I said in the beginning.
Mr. Hines, can I interrupt you? Because I just think that, we've had so much that we've said so far today.
Yeah.
And I just want to leave everybody at home, maybe we could just do just a really quick rundown of something that they could physically do. I think each panelist just give a quick thought of something that we could physically do and give somebody an action.
Well, Anthony, really fast, I just want to bring up just the fact that we're having Black community members share their experience here, Mike, is a bit problematic in itself, especially on the last panel when Janisa shared her experience and was being harassed based on her own personal education. You turned off the comments. And not only did you then silence a Black woman, but you did not protect her after she shared her experience and was being attacked. And unless you are going to take responsibility for that and make sure that if Keith is sharing his experience and he's being attacked next time, that you're stepping in and actively being anti-racist and having these panelists back, this is a huge issue.
I appreciate your views, and thank you so much, Blair, for being here on this panel. And
well, Mike, will you not turn off the comments if next time if someone is being harassed, so there is a point for further education? Because I know we can all talk here, but when the cameras are off, you're not practicing being anti-racist in your day-to-day life. This is just performative.
Mike, before you answer, so there's no confusion, what Blair is referring to was a comment stream that was on the Livingston Education Facebook page, not on the last call we did. So let's make the distinction here.
Yes.
Okay.
But let's get back to, if we could, Anthony's point, which I thought was outstanding. And thanks for bringing that up, Anthony, if we could go around
Not my point.
Each of the panelists to discuss what they think is a very important point and action items that they individually would like to see. I thought it was great, Anthony, what you brought up.
I just think that,
So Mike, why don't you start? What are the action items that you're gonna perform?
Thanks, Blair. Anthony, do you want to start an action item?
Well, like I said, I think that everybody should research HR 40, and if they agree that it should be studied, that they should write, their state representatives or their representatives.
Fantastic.
You know what? Before we do that, I know we said we're not going to be held hostage to time. I want to touch on something, and I want to get feedback from Fal, from Mr. Sousa, and from the other members on and from George specifically, because you guys, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys all immigrated to America. So when you got here and you met Black people, African American people, I know I can speak from my own experience growing up where I grew up in Elizabeth. Most of my friends, I lived in Elizabeth during the time. There was a big Cuban population there that came over from Cuba. During a bunch of people came over from Haiti during the whole Duvalier situation there. There are a bunch of people came from West Africa. There are a bunch of people came from Colombia, and their impression of and from Jamaica too, for that matter. Their impression of Black people, they took their cues from white people on how to treat Black people. It wasn't until they met with Black people, sat next to them in class, had lunch with them, played sports with them, and got to know them on a personal level that they realized that all that, to use Naomi's words, institutional and systemic racism thoughts were not true. It took them to get to know people on a personal level to know that. So I apologize for putting you on the spot, but what was your turning point? I'm sure, I'll give it one quick anecdote. There's a Chinese gentleman who owned a bicycle shop in Elizabeth, Jersey Cycles, and his son was my age. We went to school together, and we'd go into a shop and we'd play video games, and we'd look at the nice bikes there and talk about bikes and stuff. And every time we came into the store, his father would jump up and follow us around the store to make sure we weren't taking anything. until his son had to tell his dad, no, no, Dad, these are my friends. I play with them every day. Earl's a good dude. He's in my class. We're friends. You don't have to do that. He's not like that. And the father even said, oh, well, my thinking was, if he came here, he never buys anything, he might be casing the joint to steal the shoplift something. So I guess my point is, I want to ask you three, if you don't mind, if it's okay, was there ever a point where where your personal experience bumped up against the institutional, the way you or perception of Black people, where you realize, no, the two the two aren't the same. It's not that way, and then change your way of thinking.
Yeah, go ahead, Falguni, go ahead.
So I came here as a teenager and I started college at Montclair State. And I started with a very blank slate. I met lots of people and I really did not even realize so much that the racism existed because it did not exist in my mind and I wasn't preconditioned to even looking for it or detecting it. And I have pretty much have had my professional career in IT where I have worked with all people. And I have to say, I really didn't notice the impact of it until in my 30s when I became very good friends with many African Americans. And I became a very good friend with somebody at work and we became such good friends. This was after I got married. We exchange his experiences and the conversation on his experiences. And I think that's what little bit of a turning point for me, where it opened my eyes to get the insider view of how he was feeling. He owned BMW and he was telling me that every time he would be worried that he'll be stopped just because he's driving BMW. And I never really realized how all of these experiences were manifesting in people until then. As far as being a brown person coming from India, there were few things that I personally have not felt much racism. I have been one of the lucky ones, but I have known that there are people who are being affected just because they are brown. And I know people from my community getting beaten up. An elderly person ended up in a hospital just because he looked different and he was walking down the street and somebody suspected something. He was really an older person. But my bigger thing is more of a educational level, right? So history is written by victors, and India was colonized by Britishers, and they actually, in order to control such a big country as India, they rewrote the history, and there's a whole term called Western Indology, which is an oxymoron in itself. Britishers left India in 1947, but that Western Indology continued and it creeps into the education system in the Western world. And that's a falsified history. There is a lot of negative, which really affects the children here who are learning this history. And Indians, and particularly Hindus, children are being bullied based on their gods. Their gods are made fun of. Their culture is made fun of, and many of the information is purely incorrect. And I really don't know how we are going to start addressing those issues. But I think some of us are becoming aware, making other people aware. And to Mayor Klein's point, storytelling is important, but I think people need to be given a seat at the table so they can tell their stories. Many times particularly Hindus feel very much silenced.
Right. And I mean, I keep just being dismissed in my very simple question, Mike, as to you're having these people share their experiences on the Facebook group. If they are being attacked from the experiences, what are you doing to protect them?
Let me just jump in here, Blair. You keep attacking Mike. This forum.
It's important.
This is a forum that would not have happened except for Mike's effort.
Which seems very performative.
Blair,
we'll always have. Yeah,
Let
go
me
ahead.
just
Go ahead,
talk
Tom.
for a minute if I can about this.
Yeah.
I didn't see what happened before, but what I can tell you is this has been a very good conversation this morning. I think all of us are glad we participated. And it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Mike's effort. I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do here is build bridges and listen to each other's stories and understand each other, create empathy. Mike is giving us a format to do that. In fact, he's worked hard to create this format. So I can't speak to everything that's happened in the past. I haven't read all those things, but I think it's important to recognize the good effort he's made today, and to keep jumping down his throat on this is just, it seems a little out of place right now.
I don't think it is at all.
Thank you, Sean. Blair, I'm happy to talk with you online, but let's continue the conversation productively.
I mean, it goes directly into the discussion we're talking about. I mean, this is the main problem, and especially.
Thank you, Blair. Thank you, Mayor Klein.
All right, I'm going to leave on this because I really don't think this forum has the right intentions in mind, and it seems very performative to me in order to get you a seat at the Board of Education. So I'm out.
Thank you, Blair, for being here. Guys, thanks so much for discussing and continuing this conversation. We have had a number of conversations. We'll continue to use this platform to have more conversations. And thank you for being constructive and positive. We have a lot of work to do. Sure, we've made some errors in the past. That's human, right? Human nature. And we'll go forward and learn and try to do better. Anthony, as you've raised, we want a better world for our kids. And we've talked about such incredible things today at a societal level, at a community level. We're coming up about an hour and a half here. We all agreed that we didn't necessarily want to put a time frame on this. So we certainly can continue, but coming back to Anthony and others, would love to go around the room in a sense.
It goes directly into the discussion we're talking about.
We all agreed that we didn't necessarily want to put a time frame on this. So we certainly continue, but coming back to Anthony and others, would love to go around the room in a sense.
I think someone who's not muted might be playing
Yeah.
the Facebook Live back right now.
Yeah, there's a feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go around, guys. You're all so super thoughtful and appreciate you being here. And again, I think this is a platform, Mayor Klein being here, and you all are very articulate, and Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So let's, I think, what are your one or two thoughts if we go around? What can we do? How can we take action? What are some thoughts that you have? Anthony, please, you are.
Like I was saying before, study HR 40, read books, and really make friends. Make friends.
I've made many new friends on this platform and in this process. Alan, what do you think?
Sure. Like Anthony, I agree those two, but moreover, change. You have to start educating yourself, because if you don't educate yourself, again, these systems that have been in place have not been speaking to us truthfully, especially our education system. So you need to read, you need to understand our history and our past, and notice that a lot of times when I talk, I always reference history, right? So we have to understand our history, go back, read history, understand, make your own thought process, and then change your mind. And then let's go ahead and work from there.
If you could drill down on that a little, Alan, into our schools. Your kids are how old again?
My daughter is a freshman in high school, and my son is in 4th grade.
What would be some of the things that you'd like your kids learning at those ages that the schools may not necessarily be doing now, but you'd like them to be done? We talked about cultural empathy, but any others, the curriculum, so forth? Give us your thoughts.
So again, as Earl says, it starts at home, right? So actually teaching them real African American history, not just in February, but teaching them throughout the school year and making sure that they understand our culture. My kids, I make sure that they understand our culture and where we came from. But I know I do that as an African American father, but I'm not sure that everyone in the community does the same and make sure that they study what this country has been through and what we as African Americans have been through in this country.
Excellent points. George, your thoughts, one or two action items that you would like to add?
I think today we are broadcasting to Livingston education. I think a lot of people are trying to find a solution from the education. But the education is not just only for the kids, for the public schools, but also for adults like ourselves. One of the comment I heard is, why don't you, I use a harsh word. Why don't you white guy give me more leadership position in diverse environment? I think the trick behind is, the historically I would say white community, they have a leadership develop system that not only you want to become a leader, but also there's a system over there. You can develop your next generation system. So we want to have all diverse candidate to put into that system. Everybody learn how the community is looking for, how the country is looking for the next generation of the leader. So I have seen that a lot of African American, I don't want to use politicians, but they stand out to represent the African American community, and they get into the system. I just try to see if there are more Chinese people get used to this system. I know Indian community did a very good job. So that's one of the advantage that in the corporate, in the political world, Indian community did much good job than the Chinese. So I would say, not only put on our education to our kids, but also learn from our level. Don't ever think we are ready. We just want to have more opportunity. We need to have a develop a system or get used to this system to get more representative of for the community, for our ethnic group. I think that's critical. Thank you.
George, I'd like to thank you for your leadership in town in a number of capacities, now as the chairman of the Livingston Chinese Association. Yes, so thank you for that. Naomi, what are your thoughts? Thank you so much for being here. I don't know if all know, Naomi is the LHS student body president. You've been on a number of programs on Livingston Education. Thank you so much for all your contributions, thoughts, ideas. You're in your senior year, exciting times ahead for you. What are your thoughts on action items into our schools or society? What do you think?
For sure. I'd like to preface just by saying to the viewers at home, if this is like your first time learning about systemic racism or you're not very well versed in it, I'd just like to say that the nature of this conversation and the way that it has flowed, it's important to know that it hasn't entirely been about systemic racism, and it has also focused on just individual racism and bigotry, less so the systematic and institutional aspects of racism. And if you are kind of confused by that, just because, again, the areas have been kind of muddled a little bit, I really encourage you to look into the works of Kwame Ture, who is the first person to define systemic racism. And also remember that a lot of critical race theory and race scholars, it is an entire genre of academia per se. So a lot of this work that perhaps you might be coming across for the very first time, the work has been done, the research is there, and there is literature, media, all these resources to guide you and educate you. It's just very important to be critical of the sources that you're getting it from. Say perhaps an article from your favorite news website, it might be more biased than perhaps like the actual work and academic writing of Black scholars and Black activists and all the work that has been put out there. It's just really important that you actually make the effort to reach it instead of reaching out to whatever type of media is more digestible to you and your conscience, and be prepared to be a little bit uncomfortable. But again, that isn't reckoning with systemic racism, that's reckoning with individual racism and interpersonal racism. We did touch a little bit on legislation and stuff, but not so much actual institutional structures of power. And so an action item that I guess I would put out Well, it's also important to remember that racism doesn't happen in a vacuum. So there's no really way to end systemic racism within Livingston besides without actually making that reach bigger, you know. You can't just end it within a small community. But like I said before, challenging that biases within yourself is really important. Just starting to educate yourself because education is elevation. And actual anti-racist action items that I guess could be looked into through education would definitely be diversifying curriculums and hiring more educators of color, because it's very hard to, when you're actually growing up as a child, it's hard to, if you don't see yourself in positions of power, it's hard to believe that you could attain those positions of power and that you could achieve that success in any capacity. And kind of to extend that farther than education in our Livingston community, I would like to see some initiatives towards more affordable housing units in the community. I'm not sure, Mr. Klein, if that's ever been on the agenda or if that's been brought forth in any capacity, but I do think that's one of the most awesome ways and most impactful ways to challenge systemic racism.
Mike, can I just address that because his name was raising the issue, just to discuss it for a second. So in New Jersey, there is something called fair share housing, and every community is responsible for having a certain number of affordable housing units. Livingston has never shied away from its commitment to having affordable housing, and we've fought to incorporate a reasonable amount of affordable housing in every development that's come in. And we've recently created and we've just settled on an agreement for the number of affordable houses. We did it in good faith. You know, the state sometimes will look and say that you need a huge amount of units based on, for example, if you look at, we have land that's designated that we can't build on that has water preservation qualities, right? So part of the East Orange Water Reserve. And they may look at that and say, well, you have this many square miles and you have to do this many units. And then there's a dialogue that has to happen where we have to explain, listen, we can't build here by law, so you can't have that against us as a town. But fair share housing has been a very important issue for us. We are happy that we've just settled on our number. It's an evolving thing. It's not something that's ever finished. We're always looking to find opportunities for to have affordable housing in town. And I think we've done a good job with it. So it's something that is always on the tip of our brain.
Naomi, very well articulated, and the summary and going through just a short time on that. I thank you again, everyone, and Naomi, for your presence here. Could I ask you, with your time in LHS public schools, now that you're a senior, have you seen some changes in progress in regard to the learning and teaching and into the curriculum on some of these issues that we've talked today? Through your time, do you see, have you, through high school and now up to your senior year?
So I've been in the district since I was in first grade. I went to Burnett Hill Elementary School, and then I went through the whole middle school process, of course, up until now I'm a senior in high school. In my elementary school, I remember being, I think there was there's only 2 Black kids in my entire graduating class of elementary school. And then that number started to increase. And I think that has to do with just like the demographic transition that Livingston is starting to enter as a community. And with that, as I got into high school, I started to take up a lot more leadership positions. I'm also involved in the Black Student Union. And I don't think that off the top of my head, without really looking into evidence per se, there has not really been any tangible impact of culturally responsive initiatives per se on like a noticeable level, on like just an everyday type level for the student. Perhaps like besides the individual, like you have to seek it is what I'm saying. It's not just something that's put there. You have to actively seek it to reap the benefits of those initiatives.
So we have more work to do on that front.
Yeah.
Great. Artie, thank you for being here today in this panel. And for your contributions. What are your thoughts on some action items we can do either at a society or community level?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, Mike. And I think, like I mentioned before, having a growth mindset and, being open to change, like Earl mentioned, it starts at home. So I am a big advocate, of teaching kids to be kind, empathy and no name calling, respect everybody. We're all in this together. We all deserve to be treated equal. promoting people of of diverse backgrounds, creating equitable opportunities for everybody, like Mr. George mentioned. I think in public offices, in town, like keep it an open platform. Depending on your qualifications, and promote people with color. I read somewhere, I may be wrong, but our apparently our school district doesn't have many teachers of color, and Naomi just mentioned that. I think that starts, kids thinking, oh, why don't I have a teacher of color? Are only kids, white people allowed to have these positions? And so I think the Board of Ed needs to kind of reevaluate that point. In terms of solutions, I loved Mr. Sean's idea of having, airing movies, that would get kids thinking. Maybe have people, parents come in and talk to kids about racism, and, getting them aware, because some of them don't know and do it subconsciously, or others are taught. Like I said, my kids have come and told me things that I wouldn't want them to go to school, experiencing having those experiences. Yeah, that's my point of view. If each of us strive a little bit to change and get better, and
Putting the
not be
bricks
racist.
on the house, as Mr. Hines has said. Yes, building up one step at a time.
Correct.
Anthony,
I think,
your thoughts back to you. You have been a tremendous contributor, and your participation and thoughts are so valued in both of these panels and this one, as has everyone. Could you touch on your thinking, a few action items? I know you started that conversation. You.
Yeah, I thought I did mine already. So I was talking about studying the reparations bill,
Okay.
and also doing the reading. So there's so many tremendous books on anti-racism out there.
Okay.
But I also just want, everyone to really examine, because we all have them, their implicit and explicit biases, and understanding that. And again, I am 1.9% as an educator, African-American male educator in the elementary system. And so understanding of getting young people interested in the teaching profession, and how important it is, because again, I am the only African-American male teacher that any of my students are going to see at the elementary level. And it's important to tell things from the point of view. And like Sean was saying, storytelling is important, but whose story is being told, and from which way it's being told. So for example, I did a trip with my son to Battle of Bull Run in Manassas, Virginia. And the way that they spoke of the Civil War was very different than how most of us think of the Civil War. So if you're getting your story told from the point of view of someone who's sympathetic with the Confederacy, you're going to have a very different view of what took place. So that's really important to say that. The stuff is it's simple in its complexity, and it's taking you out of the equation and thinking about the system. So we often, well, I'm not this way, but it's not about you. It's about something bigger, and seeing how you fit within this puzzle. Again, if I'm a good person, but I don't do anything active when someone says a joke that's off color, I'm a part of the problem. So if my uncle is spewing things that are false, if I don't check him on that, I'm a part of the problem. If my friends are saying things and I'm not saying things to my friends, that's a part of the problem. If Val meets people who say that all African Americans are this way, Val can be like, you know what, I have my friend Anthony, let me introduce you to him, and let me show you how wrong you are. So expanding your networks and so forth, how really critical and important that is. And not depending on Anthony. Anthony's volunteering, but don't depend on Anthony to do that. And you have to read your own books. You have to do that work, because again, you are affected. Your tax dollars go up if people are putting people in prison. Your tax dollars go up if people are underemployed. Once you realize that you're a part of something larger and you're building up everybody around you, it doesn't bring you down, it builds everybody up. So that's so important, because like, I'm not affected by racism. You are. You just haven't thought about how you are. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not being the best that you can be if there are dollars taken away that could be going towards this to do extra policing. That dollars could be put into the schools. That dollars could be doing all these other things. You are affected. You just haven't thought about how you're affected by it.
Excellent points, Anthony. You know, I learned so much listening to you and everyone else. Really, again, I appreciate you being here. Who else? We're coming up to about hour 45 minutes, guys. We can continue another 10, 15 minutes if you like. Mr. Hines, had you spoken about your thoughts? Val, it seems like you're raising your hand. You want to talk? You want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say that in terms of action steps, and I do firmly believe with Earl and everybody else that it does begin at home. All of you know, we talked yesterday, the power of small steps. I really would like to, this year, once the COVID restrictions are lifted, to get all my friends and the community that I know and all the African American community people that I can reach out to and just get them together at my home. And all of the people who know me know I love to throw parties and I love to celebrate. So just everybody come home and let's talk and let's mingle and let's continue this conversation beyond. And from my end, I will do my part, and let's work together. That's all.
And Keith is going to do it at his house, and he's paying for the whole community. He's doing
I'll bring the food.
I'm looking forward to all the
Was
fun.
that Mr. Hines?
Okay,
Mr. Hines.
I'm game.
Wow, can a white guy come too?
This is not about white and black. This is about Livingston. No,
Everyone.
Keith is
I would just-
inviting everybody to his house. What's your address, Keith, so we can put it up on the screen?
14 Michael Berlin.
Mike, I just jump in here for one more second. First of all, Anthony, I think you made some real outstanding points about the hidden costs of, sometimes people, unfortunately, the economic argument hits home for people when other arguments don't. And your point is really important about the hidden costs that are involved. I would just say one other thing, because no one's mentioned this, is that, if you want a great primer on systemic racism and understanding sort of the depth of the problem as a beginner, go watch the movie 13th by Ava DuVernay.
Yes.
That is a great movie that really, I think a lot of people who haven't thought about these issues before, if they sit down and watch that movie, it's just a huge eye opener. It's an important starting point for people when they're trying to just understand the scope of the problem. And then the other thing to talk about is just,
I just want to say, Sean, it's on Netflix, so people, if you're looking for it.
It's on
What
Netflix,
is it
but
called?
it's an important movie.
The 13th, it's about the 13th Amendment.
Understood. Thank you.
It's a very good movie.
So guys, I don't want to end on myself. I have someone else in mind on that, but on my wish list, my action item, again, thank you all for being here. This is a small forum. My wish list after COVID, I would love to do a larger community forum in person at the community center, where we would have a moderator and invite all to discuss this important topic. So that's my wish list. Who else has to discuss action items? You know, Earl, you always sort of end on the high note like you did on the last panel. What are your thoughts? You're so articulate and thoughtful. What's on your mind regarding this?
I just want to thank everyone for participating today. It's good to hear everyone else's views, to give voice to people and to understand where people are coming from. You got different ethnic backgrounds, different age backgrounds, different communities we're coming from. And I think it's good to talk and, sit down and talk with one another. The going forward, what I would like to see, I can't express it any other way. I think it's a family thing, it's a church thing, it's a community thing, it's a school thing. These are all pressure points where we need to start making some significant steps forward to deal with, you know, I guess we want to call it personal, I guess, racism as a whole. When you talk about systemic racism, institutional racism, people who are of voting age, I think they need to, people who are active in politics, active in voting, active in their community, need to research laws, bills. I heard this a long time ago, and it really didn't hit me until recently when I saw the 13th, and I started hearing about this whole push for criminal justice reform and for reform as a whole. The laws weren't made for us. If anything, they were made to keep us in place. Anthony mentioned something the other day, and I hope he doesn't mind me bringing it up. When he was talking about the origins of the police force, police officers are called officers for a reason. There's an old hip hop song by a rapper named KRS-One where he keeps saying the word officer over and over and over again. And as he says it, it becomes the word overseer. And that's what police were put in effect to do, to keep Black people in check, to control them so they wouldn't go roaming the woods and roaming the area, supposedly assaulting white people, specifically white women.
The Stoner Rebellion of 1736. Look it up, everybody.
Yep, there you go. So I guess what I'm saying is, I want to attack this from two. I'm going to be strategic. I want to attack this from two fronts. I want to attack it from the point of changing hearts and minds, and I want to attack it from changing the system itself, laws, those prison institutions, the way corporations are run, the way city governments are run, the way banks are run. All these things, they weren't built for people like me. They had to change the rules for people like me because they couldn't get away with their squealing and dealing anymore because people weren't going to stand for it. So they made subtle changes, but not enough changes. And you can change all the rules you want, but until you start dealing with people, hearts and minds, and really affecting them, and really seeing people for people, and not seeing people as for the color of their skin or for their social economic background, I think you're just putting a Band-Aid on a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, if someone was to ask me, I would go to the high school and meet with the juniors and seniors who are either at voting age or about to become voters and say, hey, this is it. Now you can play your part. All these years you wanted to get involved if you had so inclined, now you can get involved. Now you can start you can say, hey, you can demand recourse. Hey, if you don't start changing your way of thinking, I'll vote your butt out. I'll put my own candidates in place. I'll run myself if I have to. Get involved. Look at the law. Write your representatives. Write the governor. Write the members of the Congress and say, hey, look, this isn't right. I have a voice now. There are people of like mind who think like me. If we're going to form a block, and if you don't roll with us, we're going to roll over you. That's how it's done. There's an old saying: some people play checkers, some people play chess. It's time to start playing chess.
Very well.
That's all I got.
Well stated, as always, Earl. Deep thinking here. Guys, anyone else? Everyone here has made such tremendous contributions this morning. We are not going to stop this conversation. We're going to continue forward. Thank you again for enlightening us and sharing your thoughts and ideas. Mayor Klein, thank you for being here with us, and greatly appreciated you listening and participating. Everyone here, we're looking forward to the big party at Val's place after. How many people in your household, Val?
We're all gonna go out there.
Backyard.
Hey, Val, can we bring food?
No, I will give the food. Bring people. Bring people. We want to get to know each other. We want to know who is in our town and hear their stories. I love this whole ideas of sharing stories. Let's do it.
So then they're gonna come to my house with Mr. Keys, huh?
So guys, on this note, it's been, again, another tremendous, enlightening conversation. Let's sign off for now. The conversation will continue. Let's take all this to heart. Let's create some action items and move forward. So waving goodbye. Have a great day, everyone. And we'll see you around town. Thank you.